Hello and welcome to the Academic Writing Centre at TU Dublin. This webinar has been developed by Dr. Joe Kehoe and Maria Jose Gonzalez. In this webinar, we're going to look at the issue of plagiarism. This is perhaps a term you have already heard your lecturers using in class, or perhaps during a meeting with your dissertation supervisor. The objective of this presentation is to help you understand what constitutes plagiarism, and more importantly, how to avoid it. Plagiarism is an issue that concerns all students from all disciplines and at all levels. Students are required to inform themselves about what constitutes plagiarism and to put in place the necessary strategies to avoid it. So whether you're currently working on a short essay, a presentation, or an extended piece of work, such as a dissertation, this webinar is of interest to you. This is the outline to the content and sections of this presentation. So in the first place, we're going to define plagiarism and explore the implications and consequences around plagiarism. More importantly, we are then going to look at how to avoid plagiarism by focusing our attention on managing sources and in-text citation. We are then going to look at patch writing and some examples to develop an awareness about this form of plagiarism. Plagiarism occurs when an information source is not properly credited. These are the words by Harris in 2017. It is perhaps important to unpack this definition and explain in detail what an information source is. And as you can read, an information source can be either in print or virtual, and it may be text or visuals such as photographs, images, or even computer code. When you introduce an information source in your writing in order to provide evidence for your ideas, you need to acknowledge the source, the author, both in the body of your work, in-text citation, so-called, and in the reference list at the end of your document. And you need to do so by using the relevant referencing style for your discipline, such as APA, Harvard, or Chicago. In other words, the source needs to be attributed to the original author so that someone reading your work is able to check that particular author and their ideas. This, in essence, is academic integrity, and it is at the core of academic values. These are the words of Marcus Boone, Associate Professor of English at York University in Toronto. Note the forceful reaction, almost visceral sense of displeasure. Boone's attitude is widely shared in the academic community. All universities and academic institutions have a policy on plagiarism. Here is an extract on plagiarism from the current TU Dublin General Assessment Regulations. I will refer to TU Dublin policy on plagiarism throughout this presentation, and needless to say, it is of the utmost importance that you understand TU Dublin's policy on plagiarism and that you adhere to it fully. You may be wondering why there is such antipathy to plagiarism in academia. Why is it such a big deal? Well, the reason is that plagiarism is the very antithesis of what academic life is all about. Academic life is all about learning, about the development of critical and analytical skills and original research. In order to engage with these core academic values and to show that you have achieved the required knowledge and developed critical thinking skills, it is essential that you adhere to standard academic conventions and avoid plagiarism in your work. It is also important to highlight the connection between learning, thinking, and writing. Writing engages you, the student, in a process that involves interpreting, analyzing, explaining, evaluating, comparing, contrasting, and articulating your ideas with the support and evidence from authors in your discipline. As you can read in this quote, Bean explores how writing and critical thinking go hand in hand. Posner points out that the student derives no educational benefit from the assignment that he completed by copying another's work. Someone who acts in this manner, in a manner mentioned under any of the 3 bullet points here, by a pure, shallow engagement with texts, does not further his education in the way which is intended in the university context. There is no attempt at considering how the text means, what the text rules out, how the text supports, complements, or contradicts the thoughts of other authors, or how the thought expressed by the text aligns or does not align with the student's thinking before he encountered the text in question. Such superficial engagement with the relevant text is not sufficient for scholarly activity. Patch writing will be explained later in the presentation. Similarly, critical thinking, analytical skills cannot be developed if the student plagiarizes an information source. Students who engage in plagiarism lose the opportunity to develop these skills. In addition, adhering to the relevant conventions relating to citation and referencing facilitates reflection on what other authors have contributed to the topic. It is generally understood that doctoral degrees, such as PhDs, are awarded on foot of a demonstration at the Viva exam that the thesis submitted constitutes a significant original contribution to knowledge. If the thesis is mostly the work of others, it cannot satisfy that criterion. With regard to the 3rd bullet point, while plagiarism is essentially passing off as one's own work the work of another, it is not permissible to use for the purpose of a doctoral thesis a work of one's own that was previously published or used in the pursuit of a degree on a previous occasion. While such behavior is not plagiarism in the sense defined in this presentation, it is nevertheless regarded as academic misconduct. Such a practice is referred to as duplication in the TU Dublin regulations. As you can see, the negative impacts of plagiarism are wide-ranging and affect the student who commits the breach, but also other students, and extends also to the academic institution and society at large. For the individual student who plagiarizes, there are a number of sanctions that may include a reduction in grades or even suspension or expulsion, but it may also have a negative impact on other students in the group. As for the academic institution, cases of plagiarism undermine the very fabric of the institution. Finally, in the area of the knowledge society, the impacts of plagiarism on society are grave and far-reaching. One strong reason for avoiding plagiarism is that while it is easy to commit, either intentionally or otherwise, it is also easy to detect. First of all, the development and improvement of plagiarism detection software, such as Urkund, used by TU Dublin, or Turnitin, has increased the risk for the plagiarist. Also, your lecturer is an expert in the discipline, and he or she would have read widely and in depth, and thus we will be able to identify plagiarism firsthand. Also, an alert lecturer may become suspicious of a completed assignment because it does not gel with assignments previously submitted by a student, or because of a clash of formatting styles between different sections of the paper, etc. You may need to consider that those whose works are plagiarized are unlikely to stay silent once they learn of the offense. Naturally, some cases of plagiarism are more serious than others. In the case outlined in the first bullet point, there is no attempt to hide the fact that a passage has been taken from another author, and a single instance of lack of citation can be put down to a momentary lapse rather than a habitual disposition. More troubling are cases such as indicated in the second bullet point, which may point to either an extreme lack of care or even possibly an intention to deceive. Most serious of all three are cases which point clearly to an attempt to intentionally deceive by passing off as one's own work the work of another. This is an extract from the TU Dublin General Assessment Regulations, and it is essential to recognize that plagiarism need not be the result of a conscious intention to cheat. Indeed, most plagiarism is probably due to lack of care in citation rather than a deliberate act. Note also that plagiarism is not confined just to written work. We now move on to this section on how to avoid plagiarism in your writing. We're going to look at managing time, managing sources, in particular, how to introduce sources in the body of your text. As a reminder, we introduce sources to provide evidence and support the ideas or concepts explored in the writing. In order to introduce sources, we are looking at these three modalities of in-text citation: quotation, paraphrasing, and summarizing. Finally, we will focus on understanding patch writing by defining the term and looking at some examples. Given the pressure on students to meet deadlines, it is essential that students manage their time efficiently. This is particularly true when we're writing an extended piece of writing, such as an undergraduate or postgraduate dissertation. Inadequate study and preparation time may lead to carelessness and using sources without appropriately marking them as quotations. Lack of time may also lead to a temptation to cut corners by copying or using the work of others. We will come to an example of patch writing later in the presentation. This list is not exhaustive, but it shows some of the direct impacts of not managing time effectively. It may lead to an incomplete reference list or inconsistent use of the appropriate referencing style and the use of patch writing. Managing sources, as you read and research the topic and themes for your written assignment, you need to put in place a system to ensure that you can find the sources you will incorporate in your writing. You may find the Cornell note-taking technique is useful for this purpose. You can go to the internet link for Cornell note-taking to learn more about this. Alternatively, or complementary to the Cornell note-taking technique, you may develop a document in Excel that includes criteria such as source, author, type of publication, such as is it a journal article, a book, a government report, a website, a synopsis of the source, comments on how it connects with your idea, as well as quotations you will incorporate in your own writing. Finally, There are reference management systems such as Mendeley that facilitate the process of referencing in the specific referencing style you are using. Managing sources is particularly important when your writing assignment includes an extensive literature review, such as part of a dissertation either at undergraduate or postgraduate level. Once you start the process of writing, you need to go back to your notes and annotations so that you accurately represent the authors you are quoting, both in text and in the reference list. An important aspect is the appropriate use of ellipses so that the author's original ideas and intended meaning is not distorted. A further extract from November 2018 TU Dublin General Assessment Regulation, you can read this strong injunction: you must, not you should or you might consider. This paragraph amounts to a demand. You ignore it at your peril. The use of the word must is used twice in the same sentence, and it underlines the seriousness of the issue. Excuses such as ignorance of TU Dublin policy, lack of understanding of the meaning of the term plagiarism, or lack of time to mark or cite relevant sources will not wash. In your writing, you should clearly indicate where you're using the thoughts, theory, or concepts of another or others. In order to do that, you may use quotation, paraphrasing, or summarizing. For example, in referring to a hypothetical 2019 work by William Smith, you might use a generic phrase, such as according to Smith 2019. But depending on context, phrases of narrower application, such as Smith 2019 disputes that, or Smith 2019 highlights that, might be more appropriate. It's also useful to consider how to integrate a quotation, a paraphrase, or a summary into our own writing, and to that end, you may consult the resources contained in the document integrating sources using signal phrases on the website of the Coventry University Centre for Academic Writing. For purely stylistic reasons, also, you may wish to use variant signal phrases in your paper. It is essential to ensure that in the body of your text, it is easy to differentiate between your own words and words from sources. You can achieve this by using quotation marks or indentation. You may also need to ensure that the words in the quotation are the exact words the author used. Also, be reminded of the appropriate use of ellipses and the required referencing style for your discipline. You probably know what a paraphrase is, but this definition by Swales and Feek highlights the importance in showing that using paraphrases to introduce authors in your writing demonstrates you have understood and that you're able to articulate the author's ideas in your own words and connect them to your own ideas. Finally, summarizing is the last modality to incorporate sources in your writing. Successful summarizing condenses the main ideas of a text by preserving the important elements and discarding minor points. Make sure not to include your ideas in the summary, and also, very important, to maintain the discipline-specific terminology. The University of Leicester offers an interesting quiz to develop your understanding about plagiarism. You can follow the internet link to that page. You will then see a list of academic disciplines. It is worthwhile selecting your discipline and engaging in the quiz, as it presents you with a quote from a text in that particular discipline, and then 6 adaptations of that quote. You have to detect whether the new version is plagiarized or not, and it offers you a correction of your decision and tells you why you are correct or not. We talked about patch writing in earlier slides, and this is a kind of plagiarism. And it occurs, as we can see there, when a source text is not copied word for word, but tweaked by the substitution of synonyms for words or phrases in the original, or changing word order in an attempt to conceal the copying. You can read Howard's definition of patch writing in the link in Merriam-Webster at this link. This slide shows a hypothetical case of patch writing. Just tweaking a text may be a problem, as shown here. In this example, the phrase in the 1930s, shown in green font, is relocated to the beginning of the sentence, and synonyms, shown in orange, are substituted for words and phrases in the original text. The derived text is too similar to the original to be counted as a genuine paraphrase. There are 2 problems. Firstly, a lack of appropriate citation, and secondly, the fact that it is a pseudo-paraphrase. The creation of such a pseudo-paraphrase that does not count as critically engaging with the source text. This slide shows another hypothetical case of patch writing. Just tweaking a text may be a problem, as shown here. In this example, the phrase in the 1930s, shown in green, is relocated to the beginning of the sentence, and synonyms, shown in orange, are substituted for words and phrases in the original text. The derived text is too similar to the original to be counted as a genuine paraphrase. Someone who engages in patch writing does not further his education in a way which is intended in the university context. There is no attempt at considering what the text means or what the text rules out, how the text supports, complements, or contradicts the thoughts of other authors, or how the thought expressed by the text aligns or does not align with the student's thinking before he encountered the text in question. Such superficial engagement with the text is not sufficient for scholarship or study. When you're quoting someone else's work, 2 elements are essential. First, you must clearly differentiate, for example, by the use of quotation marks or longer passages, or for longer passages, indentation between the text quoted and your own words. Text in the upper part of the screen is copied from page 195 of Eric Hobson, Age of Extreme, the short 20th century, published in London Abacus. To insert it in an academic text without indication of A, the fact that it is a quotation, or B, the source of the quotation, amounts to plagiarism. Text in the middle of the screen is shown in quotation marks to indicate that it is a quotation, but lacking an appropriate citation remains problematic. The correct treatment of Hobson's text, employing both quotation marks and appropriate citation, is shown in the lower part of the screen. During this presentation, we provided a definition on plagiarism and made reference to TU Dublin's policy on plagiarism, which is contained in the General Assessment Regulations. We focused in particular on how to avoid plagiarism by managing time efficiently and by keeping a record of sources, by using note-taking and annotation techniques. As a final reminder, in order to avoid plagiarism, you need to cite your sources both in the body of the text, in-text citation, and in the reference list. You also need to be consistent in the use of the appropriate referencing style for your discipline. I'd like to thank you for your attention. We hope that this presentation is useful, and you may find other resources at our website in the Academic Writing Centre at TU Dublin. Thank you once again.